Hey, I want to welcome you to Quest this morning. It's so good to see you guys, or at least I wish I could see you guys. Diane and I are sheltering here in northern Sweden with the northern lights behind us here. But I can't wait till we get back together personally. So welcome, glad you guys are here.
And Joanne and I, we're sheltering here at the beaches of Ellisville. We can't wait to see you guys. It's been a long time, but just stay safe out there and we'll see you soon.
Hello, Quest. Mike Takis. Kim and I are off the coast of Maui watching our son surf. Well, not really. That was years ago, and we're still in South County, but we sure miss you guys. But welcome to Quest Sunday service.
And this is Jim Moore. I'm coming at you live from Lake Chesterfield in my doomsday bunker down in the basement. And Kelly and I really miss seeing y'all. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime in the hopefully near future.
Hello, this is Thomas Loafman, also known as Tom and also known as Tilo. Anyway, I'm sitting here in my kitchen looking over a swimming pool that isn't open. But I certainly miss all of you and the connectedness of every Sunday and seeing you, visiting with you and hearing about your life the previous week. But anyway, we know that many of you are going through difficult times and confinement. And so I would like to take this opportunity now to pray for our church family. Father, we know this is a unique and very difficult and troubling times, and we know that there are families in our church family at Quest that are having difficulty, and I want to raise them up. Lord, I pray for protection of all of our church family. We thank you for you're hearing our prayers with regard to Gina and Manoj and their family with regard to coronavirus. And Lord, I just pray for protection of the rest of our church family from this terrible disease. And we just pray that in the near future we can be together in fellowship at church and see each other personally and wish each other well. And we just pray these things in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Right on. All right, hey, see all you guys. Take care.
Glad you're with us today. Here's a rundown of what we have going on. In other words, here's the skinny. We're still doing our New City Fellowship work days, but we're being really careful about social distancing. We will only be doing outdoor projects like yard work or outside repairs. We'll be down there on Saturday, May 9th from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., so be sure to bring work gloves, a face mask, and your lunch. If you have any questions, you can contact Mel Brown. We've given you a break from being badgered about being in our online directory, but you guys, it's really important that you're in there and your information is up to date. Please, if you haven't checked your information in the last year or even 2, just get in there and check it. If you're not in there at all, it's super easy to get signed up. Who knows? I mean, maybe we want to bring you a present and we can't because we don't know where you live. As we've said before, connection is so important right now. Prayer is an awesome way to connect to God and each other. If you have a prayer request, we want to know about it. You can send us your prayer requests online on our prayer request page, or you can give our prayer line a call and someone will be there to pray with you. No strings attached. We also have started hosting a group on Tuesday nights that gets together on Zoom to connect and pray. You can find the link to our next one on our website event page or in our email newsletter. What? You don't get our email newsletter? Well, let's remedy that right now. Type in questchurchstl.org into your browser and click Newsletter Sign Up at the top. Basically, if you haven't noticed yet, you can find everything you need to connect within Quest on our website. And again, you can find that at questchurchstl.org. Now, let's slow down for a minute to worship our amazing God who gives us hope in our future.
Savior's love through the storm. He is Lord, Lord of all.
Good morning, Quest. It's great to be together again. Though we can't be together physically, it's great to be together in a sense of spiritual or at least attitudinal way. And as this pandemic runs its course, we will find a time and a place where we can be together physically again, but that time hasn't come quite yet. But today is Sunday, April 26th, 2020. It seems like the 950th day of March, but it's really not that bad. But we'll continue through this whole thing together. But we've been learning a lot of things through this corona chaos, is what I call it. And we've figured out that crisis creates several things. First of all, crisis creates courage. And we've seen that in so many people. We also see that crisis creates conflict. And we've seen that in a lot of people too. And maybe even inside of us and around us, in our culture, in our country. But it also creates questions in people's minds about what life's all about, where is God in the midst of this, how does that all work? And so there are just a lot of questions. So we're doing this series on what and why, answers grounded in faith and hope. Because we want to answer some of those questions that people have. And we started in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 13, 14, and really mostly in 15. In fact, let's look at that just real quickly. It says in verse 15, it says, in the midst of all that's going on and all of the difficulties, it says, but in your hearts, in the core of who you are as a person, honor Christ, the Lord, as holy. Honor him as the one who's deserving of our lives, the one that we worship, when we hold up as really Messiah. And he says, in your hearts, hold him there, always being prepared to give a defense to anyone, whoever it might be, who asks you for a reason for the hope that's in you. And then he tops it off by saying, yet do this with gentleness, means power under control, and respect, understanding that those people are made in the image of God and deserve to be treated with respect. But we need to be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks us for the hope that lives inside of us. And so we really landed on the fact that we will be ready when someone says, why do you have hope? And that is a hope that's an expectation, a trust, a confidence that is grounded in what is sure or certain. And so if they ask us, why do you have hope? That we can answer that by saying, I have hope because, and then we'll fill in the blank with a variety of answers over the next 7 or 8 weeks. And today what I'd like to do is start by saying, I have hope, that you can have hope, and you can tell people that you have hope because God is real. Now, there are 3 or 4 reasons why people maybe believe that there's not a God. C.S. Lewis has said one of those reasons is a willful reason. In other words, they choose not to. They don't want to surrender control of their own lives to someone else, especially to a God. They want to be in charge of their own lives. And that's understandable. We all have acted that way. Isn't that what Adam and Eve really said is, God, I think I'm going to ignore what you said, and I'm going to do what I want to do because maybe it really won't violate you that much, and I'm going to question the veracity of your own character, God. And so there's a willful problem why some people don't want to believe in God. For others, it may be a moral problem. They can't afford to believe in God because they've chosen a moral pattern of life that violates what God is all about, and therefore I'm not going to believe in him. Now, let's be honest about it. It's usually not whether we believe there is a God or not, but whether we want to worship him and obey him. But for some people, there's a willful problem. For others, there's a moral problem, and they know that. And all of us have struggled with both of those, haven't we? I have, and I would imagine that you probably have too. But the third reason that C.S. Lewis talks about is the fact that there's an intellectual problem. And people would say, I do not want to commit intellectual suicide. or have a lack of integrity intellectually in this whole area of belief. And so in that, there may be some reasons why to believe in God, not only on a willful level and a moral level, but also on an intellectual level. And I think some of those three reasons would be this, and they're kind of fancy words, but it'd be ontological, there would be the cosmological, and then the teleological reasons for believing in the existence of God. And so let's start with the ontological. Now, this ontological argument for the existence of God really answers this question. Is it possible, or maybe even necessary, that God exists? Now, this argument may be a little bit more abstract, a little bit more philosophical than some of the others. But it was really started in 1011 AD by a guy named Anselm of Canterbury. And he kind of started this whole argument, and others have added on to it along the way. But here's what it looks like. First of all, let's draw a circle. And let's call that circle all knowledge. If you can imagine, of all the knowledge in the universe, everything that could be known and is known, everything that is real, that we would call that all knowledge. Now let's put a subset in that circle, and let's call it my knowledge or your knowledge. Now, we would probably all admit that I may not know everything. You may not know everything that there is to be known. And so really I've made this kind of smaller circle. Probably it should just be a dot of all the knowledge there is, of everything to be known. But let's make this circle represent. So beyond us, there may be things that are true that I don't know. And so it's possible for something to be true that I'm not aware of. So let's go through the argument. It kind of goes like this. The first step is this. It is possible then that God, and we're going to call God a maximally great being. That's what William Lane Craig, the apologist, calls him. So a maximally great being exists. It is possible. It's possible that I don't know about him and he exists and I just don't know it. It's possible that God, this maximally great being, exists. The second step of the argument would say this. If it is possible that a maximally great being exists, then a maximally great being exists in some possible world. I may not be aware of that world, but it's possible that he exists in some possible world out there or even around us. Third step would be this. If a maximally great being exists in some possible world, then a maximally great being exists in every possible world. Because I can't determine for sure whether he exists or not, but it's possible. And if it's possible in one world, then it's possible in all sorts of different realms that he exists. Now, the next step would be if a maximally great being exists in every possible world, then a maximally great being exists in the actual world. Because one of those possible worlds is going to be an actual world. And if he exists in all possible worlds, then he exists in the actual world. Next step would be, therefore, a maximally great being exists in the actual world. Makes logical sense. Next step would be, therefore, a maximally great being exists. And the last step would be this. Therefore, by definition, God exists. Because God would be the maximally great being above and beyond which nothing and no one could ever be. That is the definition of God. Now, that's the ontological argument for the existence of God. So it means this, the existence of God is profoundly possible and, in fact, logically necessary because he would exist not only in the possible worlds, but in the actual world. Now that's the ontological argument. Let's move on to the cosmological argument. Now this argument really says this. It is an argument for the existence of God that claims that all things in nature depend on something else for their existence. It means that everything is contingent on something else. and that the whole cosmos, the entire universe, must therefore be dependent on a being that exists independently or necessarily, just like we said in the ontological argument. Now, the one who's really advanced this primarily was a guy named Thomas Aquinas. He was a 13th century Italian theologian, philosopher, and a jurist, one who would present evidence. Now, his argument goes like this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, and therefore the universe has a cause. Now, I'd like you to watch a very short video that presents this very well. So let's watch that together.
Does God exist? Or is the material universe all that is, or ever was, or ever will be? One approach to answering this question is the cosmological argument. It goes like this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore, the universe has a cause. Is the first premise true? Let's consider. Believing that something can pop into existence without a cause is more of a stretch than believing in magic. At least with magic, you've got a hat and a magician. And if something can come into being from nothing, then why don't we see this happening all the time? No, everyday experience and scientific evidence confirm our first premise. If something begins to exist, it must have a cause. But what about our second premise? Did the universe begin? Or has it always existed? Atheists have typically said that the universe has been here forever. The universe is just there, and that's all. First, let's consider the second law of thermodynamics. It tells us the universe is slowly running out of usable energy, and that's the point. If the universe had been here forever, it would have run out of usable energy by now. The second law points us to a universe that has a definite beginning. This is further confirmed by a series of remarkable scientific discoveries. In 1915, Albert Einstein presented his general theory of relativity. This allowed us, for the first time, to talk meaningfully about the past history of the universe. Next, Alexander Friedmann and George Lemaitre, each working with Einstein's equations, predicted that the universe is expanding. Then in 1929, Edwin Hubble measured the red shift in light from distant galaxies. This empirical evidence confirmed not only that the universe is expanding, but that it sprang into being from a single point in the finite past. It was a monumental discovery, almost beyond comprehension. However, not everyone is fond of a finite universe, so it wasn't long before alternative models popped into existence. But one by one, these models failed to stand the test of time. More recently, three leading cosmologists, Arvind Borde, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin, proved that any universe which has on average been expanding throughout its history cannot be eternal in the past, but must have an absolute beginning. This even applies to the multiverse, if there is such a thing. This means that scientists can no longer hide behind a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. Any adequate model must have a beginning, just like the standard model. It's quite plausible then that both premises of the argument are true. This means that the conclusion is also true. The universe has a cause. And since the universe can't cause itself, its cause must be beyond the space-time universe. It must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, uncaused, and unimaginably powerful, much like God. The cosmological argument shows that, in fact, it is quite reasonable to believe that God does exist.
All right, that was a great video, wasn't it? Now, what it says is this, is that God is the uncaused cause. He is the one who is pre-existent and eternal. He is the one who started it all. He lives outside of it and yet within it. Look at Genesis 1:1. The whole Bible presupposes this to be true. The very first verse, the very first words, it says this, in the beginning, God. It presumes that God existed before all of creation. Because in the beginning, God who already existed, who has always been, who is and will always be, that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He is the uncaused cause, the pre-existent, eternal, transcendent being. We see it throughout the entire scriptures. Look, even think when in Exodus chapter 3, when Moses had met God on the mountain, and he had appeared to him in a burning bush, and he says, I want you to do something, Moses. I want you to go and speak for me to my people. And Moses is overwhelmed with it. And he feels totally inadequate to do it. And so he says, God, who should I tell them sent me? And God's response in Exodus 3 was, I am who I am. He defines himself as simply being, has always been, is, and will always be. I am the great I am. That's an incredible thought. So this cosmological argument is that God is the uncaused cause who lives outside and beyond us, but relates inside and with us. It's an amazing thought. Now, that's ontological and cosmological. Let's talk a little bit about the teleological argument for the existence of God. And it goes a little bit like this. The argument for the existence of God from the evidence of order, and therefore design in nature, in what would be referred to as creation, that he designed, and we call it today, in the intelligent design argument. Now, one of the proponents of this, and I think has been one of the most important voices in Christianity in the last 20 years, is by a guy named Stephen Meyer. He works now at the Discovery Institute. He is a geophysicist by training. He also has his PhD in the philosophy of science from Cambridge University. He's written two very important books recently. One called The Signature of the Cell, and how the design of the cell, the very building blocks of life, reveal a signature of God in that. It's a very scientifically based reality that he refers to. One more recently, he wrote a book called Darwin's Doubt, beginning to expose even the places where Darwin may have doubted what he was seeing, especially if he didn't understand the irreducible complexities of life. So what I'd like you to do is listen to this video by Stephen Meyer. I think it'll be helpful and very motivating.
So in the history of science and the philosophy of science, there's been this interesting battle between sort of religious folks who believe that religion should stay separate from science and folks who believe that religion and science are intertwined. And that on the one side, you have sort of the Thomas Aquinas that God and nature speak in the same language. And on the other side, you have the William of Ockham argument that basically God can do whatever he wants. And so what we don't want is a theory of science that can disprove God. And the flip side of that is sort of Stephen Jay Gould's non-overlapping magisteria argument that science handles this stuff and religion handles this stuff and there's no crossover. So where does intelligent design lie in that gap?
That's a really great question. There's basically three different approaches to the interface between science and religious belief. One is the idea that the two are in conflict, and that was the kind of dominant view that came out of the late 19th century. Most historians of science now reject that. It's very simplistic. Another view is the Stephen Jay Gould view, is that science and faith occupy non-overlapping realms of inquiry. The Galileo aphorism was science tells you how the planets go, not how to go to heaven, or how the heavens go, not how to go to heaven. But the theory of intelligent design, I think, shows that that's also simplistic. There are many scientific questions and religious questions that are completely separate, but there are some questions that both science and religion speak to, And my view is that when they speak to the same questions in the same way, that there is actually far more agreement than people realize. In fact, substantial agreement. For example, the origin of the universe, we now know, had a beginning, or the universe had a beginning. And this is one of the first words of the biblical text, that there was a beginning. So that's a point of agreement about the same issue. Is the universe finite or infinite? Both science and religion are now telling us the same thing, that the universe had a beginning. Intelligent design is telling us that life and the universe were designed. And that's something that you would also find affirmed in the theistic religious traditions. So that's a point of agreement about a special question, about, in this case, about the origins of life. So I don't say that science and religion they have many areas of specialized inquiry. There are different questions that each address, but there are overlapping areas of interest. And increasingly what we found is that there is increasing agreement as we understand the science better and as we get better, more sophisticated biblical interpretations.
You guys, that is a great video, but you can find a lot more by Stephen Meyer out there on YouTube. There is a lot of stuff, debates he's done, different presentations that he's done. There is a lot by him. I think he's an incredible spokesman for this. But we don't just base that on science, but we base it really out of God's word that's totally compatible with science. In fact, look at this in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 23. In verse 18, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth." That happened in Genesis chapter 3. It's been happening ever since. And look at it in verse 19. It says, "For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world." Now let's highlight this. "In the things that have been made." You see, the things that have been made reveal the fact that there is intelligent design beyond or within this amazing thing called creation of the world, of the universe. So, and it goes on in verse 20, it says, "So they were without excuse." No one can make an excuse because we've seen the evidence of God in his creation. Now, verse 21, it says, "And although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things." We used to exchange God for all these earthly things, maybe in building an idol. But have they in our culture become an idol also, where we've taken God and pushed him out of the picture, and we've taken what he made and made it our idol? For many people, they would say that Darwinistic evolution has become not only a pseudoscience, but it has become its own religion, trying to explain the world by rejecting even the possibility of God. And that even though we knew he was there, we did not honor him, and we filled our lives with other things. Well, what do we do with all this? Where do we go with it? So, therefore, what now? When we ask this question about why we have hope, this hope that is an expectation or a trust or a confidence that is grounded in what is sure or certain, and we answer that question with, "I have hope because God is real." And I think we find him real, and let me see if I can chain together a comment about the ontological, the cosmological, and the teleological arguments for God. I think it works, and I think it addresses reality. And it goes like this. The God who is categorically possible is in fact profoundly necessary as the transcendent, uncaused cause in a finite universe that is filled with design and detail that is unable to be explained by pseudoscientific random natural selection. You see, God really is the one who is necessary, the one who caused this all to happen, and in fact designed an incredibly beautiful world. It was his intelligent design. Well, I think that brings us to a place where we say, where do we go from there? As we answer people's questions. And so really it would be, what's the next question? Logically, sequentially, what's the next question? And it seems to me that the next question would be, what is that God like? The God who is necessary. The God who is the uncaused cause. The God who is the designer of life itself. What is he like? And is he worth knowing at all? Well, you guys, that's next week. And so we will see you then to continue this journey of trying to answer why we have hope. But to close today, I'd like to show you another video by a gentleman who grew up in Louisiana. He attended Louisiana Tech. He was the starting quarterback on their football team for 2 years. Behind him, second string, was a guy named Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw eventually became a Hall of Famer in the NFL. But Phil Robertson, instead of going into professional football, he decided to start a business that was more around his own interests in the area of hunting. And so I think he's got some real wisdom here. So for this founder of Duck Dynasty, I'd like you to watch this video to close out our morning.
Bottom line, the fact of the matter is we all going to die. It's just a question of when. So you go through life and say, I'm not going to believe in anything I can't see. I don't see God. That's what they'll say. I don't see God. Where is he? Well, do you see the virus that's causing the pandemic? You don't see that either. But you believe in it. You know why you believe in it? You see the results of it. Sickness and death. What are you talking about it? I'm not going to believe unless I see. Faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you don't see. So in the midst of it all, a person who has faith in God, you see love coming from him, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. His faith is rooted in the one he believes made the cosmos, came down in flesh, died on a cross, removed your sin. Blessed is the man whose sin the Lord will never count against him. I feel good about it. Better take me up on what I said, put your faith in him. Because you ain't getting out of here without him. I can't help it if I am about a halfway a redneck. I'm not running around like my shirt tail's on fire because of a pandemic. I'm just taking it all in. My hope is in the resurrection. I've never seen God, but I believe he's there. I've never seen the coronavirus either, and I believe it's here. All you do is look at the results.